Your kids are soft. You lack discipline.
We landed on the moon!
You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility.
It's like we've forgotten who we are. Explorers, pioneers.
This is supposed to be week in review 30, I believe, but it's now OTK with the beards. OTK means open the kimono.
Oh, I left my geisha outfit at home.
Sloan is going to go. You have to talk in the mic.
Into the mic.
There you go.
I
Sounds
need
good.
headphones. I thought you said.
No, I'm going to take them off. I'm making sure that you talk into the
Okay.
mic. So,
I'm here.
then I'm going to take them off.
I'm here.
But you got to realize, like, you got to talk into the mic.
Into it.
Because Alex likes to go on the podcast and then he sounds like he's just in the room.
Into
But
the
he should
mic.
be in the mic. Okay. So, what do we want to talk about today is what we have learned over the last 10 years. We're coming up on the 10th anniversary of the farm, February 14th, which I actually looked to remember it was February 13th, but it was like a snow day, kind of almost.
Yeah,
So nobody showed up.
I thought we delayed opening
Yeah.
till the next day.
We were still here though, because I went through all of our Instagram last night, back from the beginning, and just kind of looked at some different things to jog our memory. Came up with a couple bullet points through the past 10 years, and I'm just going to check to make sure that nobody's trying to get in here. Okay. Of what we've learned, in particular what we've learned, so hopefully there's some lessons from here, but just also some good memories and things like that. So the first thing, I'm not going to, I can screen share these, I guess. Let me screen share some stuff here. You'll just see everything on my desktop. That's okay. Nothing to hide here. So let's look at some of these initial, I mean, this looks like it was in the 1970s with picture quality.
The filter, the Instagram filter.
So yeah, the farm opened basically Valentine's Day, but before we opened, and we always talk about this, but unless you've looked at these old pictures, you wouldn't realize that you can see we have a tent with no branding. We have just a plain fold out table, some random stuff, looks like a pure white foam roller. I don't even think they sell those anymore. And a bunch of who knows what for marketing materials, and a sign that we printed at like
UPS store.
yeah, or something like that.
But can I point out that that was actually, that's a heck of a setup compared to our original setup before we even had a name.
Where do
We borrowed, before we even came up with the farm, we borrowed a tent from Bridget, I believe. It was like a tailgate tent. Had no name or anything.
I guess I don't remember this even.
Yeah, we worked 2 races with not even a business name. It was in October. Remember, Bridget and I both ran that race. And then in December, when we met David and Mary Jo Tosh, we still did not have a name. Or we had a name, but we didn't have a business location.
Well, and that's the next picture I'm pulling up here. Is this says next home to the farm. You can see the real estate sign on. This is probably the day that I either met with them or drove by and saw it. And we started putting stuff on Instagram, which is kind of funny to also look back at how we put stuff on Instagram back then. But that was super early days. I'll stop screen share here for a second. And yeah, it wasn't fancy. Our office was small. I might put some pictures in here post edit of our first office and how small it was. A lot of people have seen this before. But as I looked through Instagram, which there's very interesting thing that I found as I went through there just in a pattern. That whole first year was just community building. So it was a ton of us like doing that stuff. We did that, or I did that wacky scavenger hunt where we hid stuff all over in the state parks or around the trails and stuff. I also didn't realize that CrossFit Chelsea, which is right down the road from us, opened that exact same year, which Jared Dodson just put up his 10-year anniversary thing. So they opened up right before us. So we got involved with them. Sloan you didn't go straight heavy into CrossFit because you were doing like bikini competition stuff first.
Yeah.
But we're kind of getting into that world, and then they were coming along, which, helped us out. But the other big thing that first year was, there was, the startup stuff, which we've talked ad nauseum about that in terms of, getting our loan. And there's some other videos out there that we have that are like the farm journeys. And I think there's 3 videos. So I go through a lot of stuff. But just community building. And it was just, as we tell our new doctors now, it's, we sound like the old people, like, oh, you don't realize how much we did, but like, we just didn't, there was nothing, a time when we weren't ever doing anything for the business.
We also didn't know anyone.
Yeah. Which kind of helped because it made everything marketing, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't know anybody. So it's not like, well, I'm going to go hang out with my friends this weekend, or I'm going to go do this. It was like, well, no, I'll go work marketing events to meet people, both for the business and to maybe become friends or acquaintances or whatever.
I mean, we lived in an apartment at the time. I felt like just going into our apartment complex, like the main office, and chatting with those managers and whatnot.
Oh, yeah.
I felt like that was kind of marketing. Like, you're always presenting yourself. What's funny is we use that. You probably go into the details in our how we started videos or whatever, but we use that apartment office so often for printing materials before we ever opened the farm that we made a good relationship with one of the managers there. I still see her maybe a couple times a month. She still will message me like, hey, I sent a friend to the farm I hope you can help her with her back. I mean, that was crazy. That was over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
The impression that we made just then, but not knowing anybody was absolutely marketing.
Yeah. And it was just, like I said, it was forced hand.
Can I say this real fast? When maybe a couple years into it, I was able to reflect back. So we had an opportunity to go back to my hometown, go back to Tallahassee, Florida, where my family's at. I knew all these people. And I thought for a long time, man, that would have been so much better, starting off knowing a group of people that could fund our practice in the beginning, essentially. But I think it was actually better the other way, not knowing anybody, because it forced you to get out and meet people rather than just be complacent and dependent on who you knew already.
Which is kind of funny now that you're here 10 years, it's all like who you know. It's like relationships. So it does change, but then you have to get out of your comfort zone. So the funny thing is, and there's no negative knock here, like Seth and Alex that are our new docs, like they're not from Birmingham. Like, Seth's from kind of Madison, Huntsville area originally, went to school at Montevallo, which is closer to here than, Alex from Alabaster. They know a lot of people, but like, they don't know a lot of people around here within the business community. So you still have to break out of your bubble, which can be tougher when you're like, oh, I know all these people and maybe why aren't I getting these referrals? Well, we've talked about all the time, like they know you as a kid, they know you as a high schooler or a college kid. Like you have to kind of show them who you are in a different light. And that takes probably meeting different people. And then those actually family members, acquaintances of your family will come in later when you're a little more established. But yeah, there wasn't anything that stood out to me first year in terms of like crazy stories, wacky things. It was just how bootstrapped it was. I have another picture, which I'll put up later, of just like when I was doing this scavenger hunt, I pulled up this picture, which I'll share post edit, of how many different businesses I went to, like literally went to get things to give away. So I'm seeing like a local running store, local outdoor store, another running store in the same competition. Companies that weren't local, we were reaching out to companies like Scratch. I see Edgar's Bakery. Like what's the 15? No, the 15's from us. Like we were just reaching out to everybody and like getting a hold of them, seeing what people would give us. And, then we met them. And I mean, that's who we're heavily, involved with now, still to this day. But if that was anything else from year one that you're like, it's ton of hours. Also, we've said this before in the past that 6 months in, we kind of like hit a giant lull because we went out hot, got really busy, and then we stopped doing as much stuff. Not stopped, but we weren't doing it near as much.
Well, you're busy. You're busier in
the office. But you're so new that if you stopped, it was like you're gone. This is also, I built our original website, which is, I'll tell that in the 10-year mark about the website where it's at today. It sucked. I didn't know what I was doing. So like we had no perceivable presence outside of our office. So we had to be outside of the office all the time. Well, then we got stuck in it. And yeah, there was word of mouth and stuff, but it just giant lull. And we both looked at each other and we were like, oh, we're just not doing anything. Like, and then picked back up like 9 months. But there was a scary 6-month part where I was like, Jesus, this is not good. Which we had. The crazy thing was, I still remember this. We still had like $60,000 of our business loans. We took $109,000 out. We still had 60, and I was freaking out, which a lot of people were like, oh, why? Because I didn't want to eat any of that.
Yeah.
I said, hey, we had that. And we ended up using it over the years, and paying it back just because it was I used it as almost like a credit line that I already had. But I was like, if we go into this money, we're not growing. And I kept like telling myself that, which also I think it was pretty valuable.
If we're going to share stories, something from the first year that stands out to me is the introduction of a group of some of my favorite patients, a family. So I'm distracted. Sorry. Beau's taking a picture. I think we were like 2 months in maybe. And we had made it pretty clear in the beginning to Bridget and on ourselves that we didn't want to get involved in, what am I trying PI, yes, personal injury. Like we didn't want to do car accidents. That was really prevalent when we first moved here, was like the Alexander Shannara billboards. That when we first moved here, that stands out to me as something that just made a big impression, was Alexander Shannara. And for some reason,
He's a super nice guy, by the way.
Very, yes. But my first introduction to Alabama, top 10 things, that stands out to me. And coming out of school, you learn a lot about PI, and I didn't want to go in that realm. I thought it was going to be hard enough to start a business, let alone dive into that realm too. So we said, no PI. Well, we're in our second month or something like that. And Bridget comes back to our very quaint office/closet. And she says, hey guys, I know that you said you didn't want to do PI. However, I have someone on the phone that was in a car accident and they would like their family checked out. And we kind of just looked at her and she said, I'm bringing it to you because I think you're going to want to schedule these people. We're like, okay. And she goes, there's 9 of them. And that was so crazy at that moment in time, because the reason she could talk to both Beau and I is because we were not seeing patients, because our schedule was so light. We were just standing there in our office. So yeah, go ahead and schedule them. And I think it took us like 2 days or whatever to get everyone in. And those people to this day are great friends of ours.
In here 2 days ago,
and they've been great referral sources for ours and believers in the farm, and kind of cheerleaders for us. So that's kind of a funny story that stands out to me from our first year.
So moving into year two is when we had Sloan and I both, I didn't go heavy. I never got heavy into the CrossFit thing anyways, but like you started working out CrossFit, Chelsea, some, yeah. I didn't. And, so she was doing that thing. Well, then I still, to this day, I don't really remember exactly how we got introduced to Iron Tribe, like who invited us or who we knew. Do you know?
I do.
Oh, go for it.
Well, I got invited to a bring a friend, like a intro night. We later used him as our accountant for a little bit.
Oh, that's who invited you?
Yes.
Oh, that's my next thing on year 2. So, okay.
So I did that, but that was a lofty amount of money for us per month.
Yeah.
And so I didn't bite on it. We didn't join or anything like that. And then a networking group, you met a couple of the people in management.
I did? Who?
Lewin and Trey. And they came out to our office and we met with them. We chatted with them and they said, hey, we want to give you guys free 101s. Come out, try it, see how it goes.
Yeah, I don't remember that. Okay.
And then
I remember doing 101 because 101 they got rid of it and it was actually really good. Like it was a month-long onboarding thing. But then once Iron Tribe hit, then we realized they gave us a free 101. Then I came back to them, and I think they also came to us the same time, and we were like, we can't afford this. Is there a way that we can like work together? And it was kind of a murky, like they didn't know how we would gain value, but they thought they could work something out. So basically free memberships, and we had free memberships up until like last year, basically. But that was a gigantic like tidal wave of new patients for that second year. Like we got
extremely helpful for the practice.
The crazy thing is profit margin wise, it's not more than it is now, but it was one of our biggest years up until like all the way to year probably 9 for like profit, because even though we still had a bunch of debt, because we were making so much money with so little cost with just us two and Bridget, smaller office, less rent, like so that brings up the next point. So to cap the Iron Tribe thing, great relationship, lasted a long time. We'll kind of come full circle to that when we talk about our gym, which we've mentioned a little bit in here before. But that huge influx of members created a problem. So as Sloan said, We had used a big public accountant actually in Alabaster our first year, and we got railroaded. Even though to this day we still use the QuickBooks at that. I can't remember that lady, her name that set them up for
It
us.
was great.
I want to say Stacy. I don't know. Set that up. I mean, we spent a bunch of money that was just because they're a huge accounting firm. It's not like we owed taxes. We just paid them a giant fee to do our taxes. And I was like, wait a minute. Since Sloan met the guy that referred us in Iron Tribe, so then we switched to him for our taxes. Well, taxes came due on this year that we had a massive influx of cash. We still have, we're claiming a loss, but we were right in this crux anyways of, well, we're not going to be able to claim a big enough loss if we have profit where we know we're going to have to pay taxes. So what do we do? Well, at the end of the year, which we've told the story before, we got hit with a $25,000 tax bill. And there's more to the story, which I've told before, so I don't want to go over all the details. But that was a completely unforeseen thing when we, again, didn't have business savings at that time. We still had debt. Even though we're making a bunch of money, I'm saying making is revenue. It doesn't mean we're making a bunch of money. We had no money to just be like, oh, we're going to just pay that $25,000. And our accountant at the time, which was very shortly after not our accountant anymore, was just like, oh, you just pay it. And then he's like, oh, you can just pay over time. Like, how much should we pay? 10,000. Then you break it up. Like, unfathomable to him that like, we don't have any of that money. So what are we supposed to do? We just started biting the bullet, and we paid it down I paid it within 6 months. But that was a big lesson of like, okay, pay more attention to what's going on. Because I had questions then about, should we become an S corp? And he was like, yeah, we'll get to it. Well, we didn't. Well, we should have. And then he's like, oh, we'll get them next year. So it's always
The
for
exact
me.
quote, we'll get them next year.
So for me, it's always about learning a little bit more than you need to. Maybe, if that's you're hiring a lawyer, you're hiring an accountant, whatever it is, you don't want to know what they know, but you need to know enough to protect yourself. And that's what I didn't know anything. It's like, I didn't know the benefits of becoming an S corp. I knew it would be a tax haven, but I didn't know why. Knowing what I know now, like it was just dumb that we didn't do it in the time frame we did, even though you pay a $1,000 fee to file the S corp, or whatever. So that was the biggest thing that year, which is kind of funny. I didn't realize that's who first referred us. And so the cause of the influx kind of led to the giant, tax burden. That was a big thing in year two. And the more I looked through Instagram, year two was massive, like teaching things at CrossFit gyms, like a lot of small clinics, just teaching little things. I mean, that's all it was, like more marketing, more races, all that stuff.
I think those small little classes were really successful then. I do think that today the environment may be a little bit different because of how accessible information is via social media. You think 10 years ago, Instagram was just revving up.
We were way ahead of the YouTube, like exercise fitness thing, even though we didn't use it I was an idiot. So I've said this before. I recorded a bunch of videos. So the first thing I knew I wanted to do is put out videos for exercises, which really wasn't being done at that point. So I still remember I got a Sony A6000. Sloan was recording most of them, which were still really good video. And we were putting the videos on YouTube, but I wasn't like promoting it. And then I'd put the link to the YouTube video in an Excel file, and then we'd have Bridget send people home exercises. We just tell her what to send, which is stupid now thinking about it. Well, then as YouTube became more of an SEO engine for Google and stuff, we started getting a lot of like people like, man, I see your stuff on YouTube. I see your videos. And it was just like, that was a big SEO thing, even though our website sucked, which we'll talk more about that in a second. But then we started, CrossFit Chelsea, CrossFit Alabaster, all these places, CrossFit Birmingham started asking us, and then other offshoots that got us introductions with like Lululemon because of the CrossFit community. And then we taught stuff for Lululemon. And that became like, that's what we did. Like people knew to reach out to us to teach classes, and we reached out to people. And one big lesson through this whole thing is we never stopped reaching out to people. We never got to a point where like, oh, people are asking us to do stuff. No, it's constant. Like I looked back and I was like, I can't remember or forgot that we did that. Like just all this different stuff, like races that I'm like, oh yeah, the race still goes on. I even thought about like Save the O's. That's at Greystone. Like we haven't worked that race for ovarian cancer and I don't know how long. It's a great event. I don't know why. It's stupid stuff they need to do. But that was mainly year two. And then going into year three, which is kind of interesting. So we signed a 3-year lease on that initial small office with a big, very large, holding company around here, a guy that owns a bunch of real estate.
Is it 3 or 2?
3 because we got out of it early. So neighbors, or a couple suites down from us, was our current landlord now, who's Ridgecrest Properties, which is a home builder. They came to us because I think we had talked to them about a few things, or I don't know exactly what it was. But they came to us and said, hey, we're building a building right across the street. Would you want to be our first tenant? And we'll kind of give you a sweetheart deal on rent. And we're like, how much is it? And he told us. And so at that point, I'll tell everybody on here, we were paying $13.50 a square foot, which a lot of people in California are like, oh my God, for 1,198 square feet. And then these guys offered a $16.50 a square foot for 3,000 square feet. So I was like, yeah, let's do it. And so we got out of our lease a little early because we used some just leverage stuff with the office of things that had happened, and came over there within year 3. So it would have been 2016. And that was kind of, I wouldn't say we bit off more than we could chew by any means, but in my eyes, I was like, we have a bigger space. We need to use it. So that's when like we went and got a yoga instructor that we flew all of us to Nike headquarters in Beaverton and did FRC and like had her certified in kin stretch, and was trying to add all these things. And like that fizzled really quick after, all this time and money. And we kept trying to figure out. And then we had, Jake Nomchef, which was a great coach with World of Fitness, like all these things that we were trying to get in there, and, nothing was really clicking. I think the space looking back now is poorly designed, then poorly utilized, even though it wasn't terrible. Like I liked it. It just wasn't the greatest use of space for an office. Which that created learning curves where I'm like, we changed, we did construction in there when Daniel came on board to build a treatment room and take out some other stuff. But the biggest thing that I picked up in 2016 was that's when you were really competing in CrossFit. Like that was that was a lot of it. And then a ton of those little clinics. That's all Instagram was me competing in trail racing, you competing in CrossFit, and then clinics. That's all it was. And that's what we said again. It's not like you have to go replicate what we did, but we did our thing within the community. And to be honest, us doing it at a fairly high level, no like humble brag there, helped a lot because it puts you in the limelight. When Sloan's up on a podium winning at a CrossFit competition and she's wearing farm stuff and they're like, oh, you go on the farm, like that's marketing. You win a trail race, you're up on the podium, oh, you're from the farm. It's marketing.
Buys you a little bit of credibility.
It's very different than going doing it and finishing 55th. And so I'm not saying that's going to work for everybody. It worked for us. That's not happening anymore. And we still have to market. So it's like, you got to pivot and shift. But again, we were in our element doing our own thing. And that's why I think it was authentic and people were like, oh, this is cool. That was the biggest thing that I picked out of, again, Instagram. 2016 we went to Hawaii.
17, I started gymnastics.
That's what I'm bringing up next. But we started, we finally did a honeymoon, partially on my sister's dime because we didn't have enough money. So we got married in 2014 and we didn't go on a honeymoon without my sister's help in 2016. So like, again, sacrificing things that were like, hey, let's go back to the wedding for a sec. So both our parents come to an agreement of like a set amount of money they were going to both give us. And they said, that's just money. You can do whatever you want with it. I remember Sloan and I having a very like serious conversation at one point. I was leaning more towards let's just get eloped and we can take all that money and like use it because we had no money and we kind of landed in the middle. We didn't go crazy. Sacrifices. And I think I have no problem with what we did. It was fun. I actually found a bunch of those Hawaii pictures the other day, which I forgot about.
No, we had an amazing wedding and it was well done and it did not cost a fortune. I'm proud of our wedding. I think it was a great weekend, but I like to tell people this. I didn't love it at the time, but we saw patients Wednesday until 6:00. And then we had our rehearsal dinner Thursday, got married Friday, and then saw patients in the office Monday morning.
Yeah. But that's when we were also really busy.
That was first year. We didn't have another option.
Yeah. So, sacrifices, but we all knew that was happening beforehand. So it's not like, throwing one spouse for a loop or something. It's 2016, moving on to year 4, 2017. So we're in this bigger office. Sloan's seeing a ton of gymnasts. That's something that kind of happened in 2016 as you got established within a couple of the major gymnastics gyms around here, which then led to Sloan having these kind of recurrent thoughts of like, Jesus, there's just no prehab for the inundation of training that gymnasts like go under. Like they're going to have injuries, right? They train upwards of 35 hours a week. So like, how are you going to get ahead of it? Well, then she started, trying to teach these little prehab clinics. And then we were like, you need to do this on a bigger basis. Cause then she was getting asked to kind of speak at these gyms. So she started Gymnast Fix, which to this day, I think is a great idea, just not capitalized on because all the stuff's kind of sitting there. But we built out a website. We actually hired somebody. Someone kind of had a partner in the beginning of that, and built great protocols, had a whole teachable back into it, and also had a high dollar in-person kind of consult thing. Like you could use Sloan for the Day, which was being used by gymnasts from kind of all over the Southeast. And you can answer this one. Why did that fizzle?
Is this really, this is pulling back the kimono?
Yeah. Because it was successful. Like she was making money as a consultant. You also started working with University of Alabama then as a consultant. We're teaching these things. You had some people, the online stuff wasn't hitting, but we also weren't selling it. We were just kind of, it was there. It was all heading in the right direction. In my opinion, it still has huge bandwidth. Probably during that time, if we would have capitalized, it was much better because now there's just a lot more online noise. Why do you think it just kind of, and it's not like it failed. I'll let Sloan take over from there.
Oh, it just didn't succeed to the level that it could have, and it should have really. The number one thing I think of is I would get so frustrated with the online portion. I would get frustrated with the compliance, getting individual gymnasts to follow something that is an addition to their already training is really tough. Like to create that buy-in for them to do. You said they train upwards of 35 hours a week. Well, then I'm giving them more stuff to do. And so then that's when I struggled with, okay, who's my target audience within Gymnast Fix? In the beginning, it was gymnasts.
Yeah.
But it really needs to be the coach that's overseeing the program. And I have had a lot of success with a few, but that's a difficult, like with any sport, any sport that's been around for a long time, there's kind of this barrier to entry. Like there's a way that the coaches run things, and it's kind of seen as this tried and true thing, which I would argue against. And it's hard for them to accept change from a quote outsider. And so I would get really frustrated with how can I make a big enough change to make a difference? And I felt like I was just creating the smallest little dent in a really big problem. Does that make sense? I wasn't prepared to put my feelings about Gymnast Fix into words here. I should have been, I guess, I suppose, because it's a big part of our story here. But I would get really defeated feeling.
Yeah, I think there was a failure to fly. Like you had the defeated feeling, but then also that kind of undermined your confidence in general with what you're doing, is from what I saw. And then that kind of like short circuited the whole thing.
Well, it's kind of like my story with gymnastics. I did gymnastics for, what felt like ever. And when I was done with gymnastics, when I kind of retired, I couldn't watch gymnastics. I couldn't talk about it for a couple years. I wanted nothing to do with it. And then I slowly kind of got my feet wet again and loved it. So then when I started treating gymnasts, I loved it. And then I would get disenfranchised. I don't know what the word would be. Frustrated with it, where I wouldn't want to pursue it because I felt like gymnastics was what it was, and I wasn't going to be able to do anything to fix it or to change its route, which is so wrong. It's embarrassing to say that out loud, because I do think I'm not questioning what I know and what I was doing. Maybe I should be upset with my inability to continue pursuing it.
Yeah.
And then we got pregnant with Maddox. So then I had Maddox.
You're jumping way ahead though.
2019.
2017 is when Gymnastics started.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did a lot in a couple years with Gymnastics.
You're skipping way ahead. We didn't get pregnant with Maddox like when Gymnastics
No,
was
well,
going.
Okay, but
The bulk. So when we look at Instagram, the announcement was in the beginning of 2017. So there was a whole, 2 years of really a year. I mean, that went for a year and then it got shut down. You weren't rolling with it too far beyond that in terms of the online stuff. You were still doing consulting with some of the people that existed before, teaching some stuff. The Alabama stuff had already like flatlined within a year. Like that's all kind of documented pretty well. So
okay.
yeah, I don't know.
Well, when I really kind of put it to the side, pushed it to the side, was in 2019.
Okay. So the other thing off that is, do these side hustle things detract from like the business? In Sloan's case, we were just using her niche, like skill stacking. It didn't take away. It was just like, you're already doing it. You need to capitalize on it in different ways. So it didn't take away at all. It actually, like she saw it, I think at one point, like 70 to 80% gymnasts. Like that was who she saw, which was it wasn't tough. The only detraction was if she was ever out, like it was very hard for me to step in to see into her patients because like I just don't understand that world like she does. So that was like the only like downfall, but that's getting easier for people in here now just as we're all at a kind of higher level in general. Year 5, which is 2018. So in 2017, we also hired a marketing person for the first time ever on salary, which was a giant mistake, to help out with Gymnast Fix, but then now like a dual role, like, hey, you help out with Gymnast Fix, and then you can help out with some of my stuff that I was starting to get going. Cause in 2017, end of that, I started my first podcast. That was a giant mistake because it was our fault of not, I don't know, qualifying the person properly for the job. Just kind of going off of what we thought they were able to do. And then it wasn't a good personality fit. So just weren't good at interviewing people for a job. To just hire them.
I think the skills were there.
No, not for the online sales component. We were wrong on that, like for sure. Cause that's something that kept faltering that I realized like, oh, you don't know how to do this. The design and all that stuff. Yeah, that stuff was there for sure. But like, we knew that was a solid, I mean, that's what they did before. But yeah, what we needed, the online jumpstart was not there. And we were very upfront. That was the biggest thing. So that was kind of my mistake.
Hiring the right people.
Which I've learned if I hired another creative, this is Tim Ferriss's advice, have them do free work for 2 weeks. If they're not willing to do it for 2 weeks, don't hire them because you'll find out if they know what they're doing or not. And if they're not willing to do it, don't hire them at all. Tell them what their salary will be or whatever after those 2 weeks, but like put them on a project, put them on something and then be like, depending on how you do on this, that's your interview. It's a working interview. Doesn't mean you have to be in my office because you can do it at home with digital stuff.
Thankfully, over the years, we've only had a few of those stories where we did not bring in the right puzzle piece to our puzzle.
And around the same time, when we had the bigger office, we also had whatever you want to call him, like a devout patient of mine. To this day, it's one of the craziest stories of when I treated her husband. He had legit like atrophy of his upper trapezius, which we knew was cervical. We sent him home with a McKenzie protocol. A week later, his trap was back, which is insane. And I know you're like, that's impossible. I'm just telling you, like, that's what happened. So they were like, what the hell? Well, she then became a massage therapist and then was driving 2.5 hours to work at our office 3 days a week. Bad communication point there was she wanted me to be her mentor, like 100% her mentor. I am a doctor, run a business, and she wasn't very upfront voicing to me like how much time she needed, which we had time to teach and stuff, but like I guess she wanted, an open the kimono episode every time she was in the office. That's not possible. So that lasted maybe 6 months, and then she kind of fizzled out on that.
A few other people that have come in and out of the farm, it's not that they were bad people to bring in. They were great people to bring in when they left here. They've now flourished. Like
Jake, went and bought a gym, which was his whole goal from the get-go.
I mean, done amazing things.
Steve Pawnee, who's our first massage therapist, absolutely still killing it with his own practice.
It brings me a lot of joy to know that the farm was a big stepping stone for them. I hope that they view the farm as the same way, but I love to see that
Yeah.
They're successful in their own ventures now.
So then in 2018 is the first time besides these little clinics that I taught. So I taught at the ACA's Sports Council or Sports Symposium in Minneapolis. And then before that, I had started my first podcast, which was called True Health, if you remember that. So that was really a lot of local people, like Birmingham. We still had some like cool guests and stuff. We also started hosting seminars that year because we had that bigger office. So we wanted to capitalize on that. Like 2018 is when we had like Perry Nicholson and some of those people come in. And then I also realized that 2018 was the first time that we ever paid for actual marketing because we worked the Magic City Half Marathon. So it was the first time that we paid for an event. So there's a lot of stuff in 2018. Like I was starting to be like, ooh, I think I could teach. And I still remember when I was teaching or listening during the ACA Sports Symposium is when I filled out the application for TEDx. It's like in my mind, I was like, hey, I think I might be decent at this. So all of these kind of individual things for me, like Sloan was doing gymnastics, I was like, I think I can kind of go over and do some of this stuff. So that was kind of that year for me of like stepping out, that marketing person. I was trying to, use them for that, which didn't work out. And then it brought it back to me, which slowed it down again. But I would also say what's crazy that I didn't bring up in 2017, 2018, no posts in Instagram in 2018.
We didn't have a single Chirofarm Instagram post.
No. I think why is we talked about it, I was like, yours should be Gymnast Fix, mine should be me. And like the farm, we don't really need to do it for whatever reason, which is kind of funny.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, which again, you're like, oh, what's that matter? I don't know. Maybe taking your eye off the ball kind of type deal. But yeah, nothing, which is I was like, that's insane. Cause I was looking at the dates when stuff was happening.
Well, we were busy.
Yeah.
We were
busy,
we were doing
had
things.
really going after it. I wouldn't say financially from year 5. We were doing well, like not massive growth, but rarely was there in the beginning. We had obviously losses. There have been probably in total 12 months where we had, no profit, which is not uncommon for a business. Like that's sometimes what I want. But at this point, like it was steady. Like we kind of could rely on it. We were making a ton of money. We were making enough money to do what we wanted. Also, this is 2018 is when we got asked, 2017, 18 to get asked to house sit. Mm-hmm. So we were starting to look at houses and stuff like that. We're going to, our lease is coming up on an apartment, and then people asked us to live in their house, which we ended up living in that house for almost 3 years for free, which is pretty crazy. It's a much bigger house than we live in today. And that helped us a lot because we didn't have
that's an understatement
mortgage payment. So we've had a lot of those are people from the gym that we were a part of for a long time that, were acquaintances. So again, gets back to kind of who you know and putting yourself out there. Kind of skipping ahead to 2019, because this is when stuff does start to, I think, really start to evolve and change. This is when I would say our business became more mature, like a lot of like recurring stuff. We're not having to work as many events. We still were working some, but like just constant flow. Like we were hitting, at this point, it's just us two. We were doing 50 to 60 new patients a month. Like, we were just absolutely rolling. But this is when I had my second podcast, which was my biggest like play at it. And this is when I had, big names like Kelly Surratt and these people on the podcast. And as I looked at our Instagram, I also realized that's when like people started reaching out to us, like the Alyssa Delos, functional herbalist, all these people started wanting to come like doing stuff with us, which is kind of cool, and started doing a lot more like outside interviews and stuff like that. In 2019 is like, I think it got us a lot of notoriety just within the profession. And then that's what drew in more interns. And then Daniel, who's been with us for a while now, wasn't an intern. He kind of came and shadowed, and then asked if he could do his preceptor, and we kind of let him. And that goes into 2020, which Daniel's preceptor ended in December of 2019, started January 14th of 2020, or technically started then. And, COVID hit shortly thereafter. So that's where for us, this was kind of for a lot of people, eye-opening experience in 2020 going through COVID. But we had just hired a third doctor, so we're stepping out. You don't lose money technically, but it's, you're technically making less money in the beginning with that because you're paying percentage out on stuff that we didn't have to pay before. And we hit this COVID spot that was weird for everybody. So you had to kind of figure out which is stupid to say now, where you stood in terms of ideologies, which for us, I think was a net neutral, maybe even a positive, because people kind of got to see where we stand on some other stuff besides just musculoskeletal. Also at that time, I was treating the guy that literally came up with the rapid test, along with his wife, like who teaches for med school at UAB, along with the guy who's the head infectious disease researcher at UAB, like the guy that headed up AIDS research, and got to talk to them about this. And they were seeing me while most offices were shut down. So it was a very interesting time. All that to be said, we did shut down for 2.5 weeks, furloughed Bridget, our front desk, and had enough money in the bank to basically withstand that storm, which for the people listening to this, as soon as you do need to have that kind of like emergency fund as a business. Did we have enough? Probably not, but we didn't run out of money by any means. And I had to eat into checking, not just savings, but going to operating account a little bit. We did fine. And then by being able to furlough people and still kind of stay open, then that helped us with all this relief that happened afterwards, which was also a massive windfall, if I'm being honest, for a lot of people. Was not realizing you were going to get this money back, right? That wasn't talked about. For us, a lot of these things came out in 2021, which was a huge influx of cash. So it's kind of being, again, prepared allowed us to do things that then, benefited us, which nobody knew what the tax law was going to do at that point, but, just being prepared. The third doctor thing was a little different. That's when also, right when Daniel was towards the end of his preceptor, I started traveling or went and lived with a professional tennis player in Florida and was about ready to pull the trigger on basically going on tour with him, going to the Australia Open in January. And Sloan was pregnant. We didn't quite know when Maddox was going to come. Daniel was there, luckily. So he literally, his, practice got built like almost overnight because I just left for the first 2 weeks or whatever it was. But I ended up didn't pull the trigger on traveling with that athlete for lotteries. Wasn't a good personality match. Would have made a bunch of money and stuff. But, lo and behold, again, he ended up retiring not that long after, having another injury, then retiring.
And 2020.
Yeah, it would have got shut down.
Yeah.
So I also quite possibly would have got stuck in either Australia. Or Asia, which really shut people down. Because he cut it short. Well, no, because he had a knee injury 2 weeks into Australian Open, and then he came back anyway. So I would have came back.
But would he have the knee injury?
I think so.
But I was due in March, and
yeah, it was just too close.
You were toying with the idea of going to Australia for.
I was gonna go, and then they said you can leave whenever, and then I was like, yeah, I know, I don't know. It just seemed weird. And then if I did sign up for that, I mean, I was gonna be gone.
Yeah.
6 months out of that year. So
there was a lot of things pulling you away from it, and then in hindsight, looking back, it wouldn't have happened anyway. Even if you would have signed up for it, you would have done maybe a 2 months, and then COVID would have shut it down.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out not to have to balance that, with everything else COVID threw at us and having a child for the first time. Yeah.
So adding a new doctor, that was a big deal for us. Like stepping out, because it had always been the Beau and Sloan show. We had a little bit of growing pains with like people not wanting to see Daniel just because he was new, but Daniel like honestly stepped up really well. I mean, we had, you're going to have issues, like nothing major, obviously. But kind of stepped right in and fit in with the front office and all that stuff.
Well, something that you would talk about a lot through those first, what was that? I guess 2020. So the first 6 years of our practice, you say we have to make sure that, well, we would toy with it. Do we want to be known Dr. Beau Beard and Dr. Sloan Beard, or do we want it to be the farm? And we'd kind of go back and forth with that. But ultimately we knew this has to be the farm. People need to come to the farm. They don't need to come see Dr. Sloan Beard at the farm, because if we ever did want to grow one day and have another doctor, we wanted them to be part of the farm and not just this third wheel kind of situation. And so that was some of the growing pains bringing Daniel on, is people just didn't know him.
Yeah.
But once they got to know him,
Yeah.
it is
And he has
such a solid fit.
and honestly, and he would say the same thing. He has I mean, it's very, very similar, a little bit different practice style than us, just a little bit different, but then like he like has a thriving practice. And I say thriving practice because he's a contractor. So I consider their practice like mini practices within ours. But like, does really well. And obviously any and all of us could do a little bit better. So we're still honing stuff, but yeah, has fit in. And I mean, it's kind of crazy to think he's been here for, almost 4 years now. But then shortly after Daniel, well, I guess 6 months into that, we had another preceptor because again, we're starting to get a little bit more bandwidth. Have another preceptor that comes in, and then they voice that they'd like to work the farm, and we bring them on. Which, in hindsight, probably a little too fast. Just adding a third, and I don't know, a little fast, but
Can I go back for a second? I want to talk about Daniel for a second. So I had Maddox March of 2020, and so I took maternity leave.
Yeah.
And so that also helped.
Yeah, so I was out with the tennis player, then flipped around. Sloan's out with Maddox, so like Daniel's just getting like shoved on these people.
And so while I was out, and when the office was reopening, it was tricky because it was again 2020.
Yeah.
But Daniel saw most of my patients, and so when I came back to the office, it's still to this day. I mean, it's years later, but there's several of my patients that continue to see him. And I think this is like this weird scenario. I always make a point to hi and I want to know how they're doing. Like I really genuinely connect with people in here. But I think that they feel bad, like, oh, I don't want Sloan to think that I'm demanding her, whatever. But that speaks so much volumes on Daniel that people love, trust his opinion, his care for them is top notch, that he didn't fill in as just maternity leave support for me. He stepped in and filled in as their doctor and has continued to be their doctor for years on.
He always says this. He goes, I just had to like, people expected like Beau or Sloan, and like I had to like, which is a good thought to have. Like, yeah, you're stepping in after we've been in practice for 5-6 years, like, or 7 years, I guess, at that point almost.
It was a tough role, and he took it on, and
not that he didn't have like
thrived.
Sticking points and stuff, and we all still do, but like he did really well overall. Yeah, still does really well.
Which congrats to him.
Yeah,
they just had a
third
baby,
little girl,
2 days ago.
So party of 5. But yeah, so another preceptor comes in during the preceptorship is great. Won't go into a ton of details, but like again, probably not a great interview process. Even though the working interview, I think we got a little catfished. So then the person starts working here. A lot of, in my opinion, personal life stuff was driving them not thriving in here. So they were clinically, like skill wise, pretty good. But from a personality mismatch, like that time of their life, it's terrible. And if I'm being honest, we should have let this person go before they ended up telling us they were leaving, which was a blessing in disguise, because like we were literally about ready to fire them. We should have both came to a mutual agreement like much sooner, like, hey, this is not a great fit, like need to do something else. For being honest, and I'm not calling Sloan out, it was more of a bleeding heart of like, God, this person moved here to work here. Like, we don't want to just pull the rug out from underneath them. Anybody listening to this is taking business advice. You cannot run a business on emotion solely, and that's rarely how you should have run it. You run emotional response with your patients. That is what you're going after. Is I have it up on the board here. The patient experience equals $1 million. Like, the patient experience is an emotional one. You want them to leave with a smile on their face, feel good about themselves, regardless of what happened in the treatment room with their injury or whatever. When you're dealing with employees, obviously you want to get along with everybody, but when it comes down to a business, like you have to make decisions for the business, which in itself is an organism or an entity, and not like realize like that person, as good of a person they are, is a thorn in the business side, and that's like killing the business. It's not killing you. So you have to extract yourself from the personal side of it and be like, no, this is like not good for the business. And that's a hard thing for people to, I think, like differentiate, like, I like you, you're not a good fit. Or whether it's a business relationship with an advertiser, we've changed a lot of stuff that like, it wasn't a good fit. Like, it's not that we don't like you, and that's what it can seem like personal, but you got to make those moves. And the more I've learned, I'm a fast actor, but like, you got to make those moves fast. Otherwise you just burn time. You get resentful. You're like, oh God, I should have done this. Like, just not good. So as soon as you see those, you'll know it. Take action on it. Like, take action on it.
Well, a lesson for me is it's not good for both parties.
Yeah.
You
oh,
know,
no.
it's like
We had to tiptoe around. It was killing a vibe in the office, and yeah.
well, it's just not just not beneficial for either.
Yeah.
So you can, like you said, bleeding heart, you can feel bad, but
So
it's not good for either party.
that was 2021 when we had 4 doctors. We also getting a little bit bigger, started an app, which, people like for whatever reason thought made us like put us on the map. It's like, no, it just made us pay more money each month. But that's when I started testing the waters on different things. And that's the first year that the residency came out, which if you're watching this, well, anybody can watch this part 'cause it's not behind the residency paywall. But if you're part of the current residency, that's basically the 4th go round. Because I did 2 rounds of the residency early on, then it went into R2P. Now back kind of on my side. But just kind of wanted to start mentoring because we were getting a lot more interns. So while our 4th doctor was there, then we had another intern that is now technically, I guess, part of the family. And then it just from there, like we haven't not had an intern or preceptor like from that point on. And then that's where it kind of gets into, 2022 was like the big year for like interns, R2P. We'd, have all these people shadowing and stuff. And obviously Seth and Alex, which the stories of Seth and Alex, if you don't know this, Alex was a patient, which I just sent a video to Seth and Alex. I should share it on here of Alex doing DNS exercises when he's in high school, which is absolutely hilarious. Maybe might have been college then, probably college. But Alex was an OGE patient, like 2nd year in practice, I think. And no, he was, I don't know.
It may have been 1st year in practice.
No. He wasn't 1st year.
Yeah, was that our first office?
I don't know. He wasn't 1st year. I know that for sure.
I definitely met Michelle very early on.
But he was seeing another chiro or another PT before then that fixed his foot. But anyways, OG, then him and Seth became friends, Montevallo, and then Seth came and interned here for undergrad, and then obviously they both preceptored here, and now they're both working here, and they're both doing awesome. But that 2022 was that big year of like R2P, doing that kind of thing, interns. At that point we have basically a 1.5, 2-year-old. So kind of getting Sloan is fully back into, I wouldn't say fully back into practice, but into practice more than she was, because now Maddox is starting to go to like Mother's Day out stuff and do little things like that. But then, as she got pregnant with Kit, and then kind of falls back off from pregnancy, because you were pretty sick for the first 3 months again.
That whole pregnancy.
Yeah.
Whoa.
And then kind of went out for the end of the year. Well, that was right as Alex was coming in, right? Which kind of worked out again. Not quite as, full, because she wasn't as full go as she was before.
Yeah, I didn't have a full 40 hours of
but it still helped. So then as we get into 2023, obviously now, we have 4 doctors. So Alex was brought on from his preceptorship as a doctor in 2023. We have another new office. We moved into this office January of last year. So we've been in here. We opened a gym in March of last year. So that was a huge addition, something we've kind of always wanted to do. I just in my opinion, didn't know how to do it, how it would look, how that would work with, working with other gyms from a relationship standpoint. And then it may seem like a minor thing, but to me, it's really not. Hosting this race that we put on last year, the Barn Burner, which we did in June, I think is a huge deal of putting on, it's a marketing event. Like it's, it makes us money. It didn't make us any money last year because that was my fault. But it will make us money this year. It's marketing. So like that to me, pat myself in the back, I think it's genius. If you can make money instead of paying money and market, I think it's a great thing.
Well, if you're willing to undertake another task.
Yeah, it's not easy. And luckily I had Seth and Alex here, which are both in the running game. And like Seth marked the whole course with me, and it's an undertaking for sure. But hopefully that grows. And then that kind of helps us solidify ourselves in the community out here, because like, that's just kind of how these things go, which there's another race the weekend before now, which kind of sucks. Because we were one of the
I
only
did
races
see that.
in June.
I had
Yeah.
to go back and verify that
Yeah.
they were different weekends.
But it's only different because I'm out of town the weekend that it's supposed to be. So we'll see. But anyways, so 2023 was a big year. Sloan was out, for most of 2023 and then came back 1 day a week. When did you start doing that? August. So she's been here a little. And then, Seth started preceptoring earlier in the year. And then, as a preceptor in here, basically after 2.5 months, you're full go. Like you're seeing kind of your own patients in particular, if we know that you're going to work here. So we're trying to build a practice before you just, launch, which is, graduation December 16th, I think. So we were working towards that. Some of the growing pains with that were, the gym didn't take off as fast as we thought it would due to some contractual issues with the previous gym, like a non-compete issue. Honestly, moving from 4 to 5 doctors, we've realized like we have to do a hell of a lot of more marketing, which will change. We may have to do some more traditional paid marketing. And I'm going to talk about the website because that's a thorn in my side. Just because we're spreading visits out across 5 people, even though Sloan's 1 day a week. So I'd say maybe it's 4.25 doctors. Spreading them out. So like we may be seeing the same amount of visits, but like now we're paying more out to contractors. So we have to up the ante. So we have goals. For anybody that's listening to one specific, like for us, bare minimum, we need 60 new patients a month, which seems not like a lot since we used to do that between just 2 people, but that's bare minimum. And then we have kind of some other goals of things we would want to hit in terms of like patient visits and things like that, obviously for, how much each one of our doctors wants to make and this, that, or the other. But with that, one thing that, this is the open the kimono. So this is where you tell this stuff. So in December, there was a lot of inner office stuff that kind of just like the vibe in the office was low and there's nothing we could, do to remedy that. But at the same token, I just noticed like a precipitous drop off in new patients. And we were all like, what is going on? Like December sometimes can be slow. Like people, even though it's the end of the year, like, oh, I ate my deductible, but they're busy. One of our massage therapists has gone to Europe for 3 weeks. Like we were traveling, like, so it wasn't a full working month. And pretty soon I'm like, dude, this is not good. Well, coming to January, still not good. And I start just like realizing like we're getting no like traditional traffic. So there for a while, which kind of amazed me, we were getting people that are like, I found you on Google, which was never something we had. Like it was always word of mouth, very specific events.
New patients.
But it was like, found you on Google. And I was running some ads, but like, it's like, why is this working? Don't know. Well, it's like somebody literally shut that valve off. And I was like, what? So I'm like looking through all this stuff and going through it. And then I quickly realized like, okay, I'm at a point in my career, both from I don't have enough time due to family, what I have to take care of in the practice, and other ventures that I want to do outside of the practice to take on things like this. So here's my advice at this point. We bootstrapped a lot of stuff. I built a website. We never paid for marketing. I didn't do any of that stuff. Guess what? We're 10 years in. We're a totally different clinic. We're evolving. We have to change. And that's what you're going to have to do because now what am I saying? We're getting ready to probably, do a newspaper kind of ad thing for this like local journal that's monthly here, another magazine. I'm paying a guy out of California to completely rework the SEO on our website because he literally told me that our website sucks yesterday and seemed like an awesome guy. And he's like, we'll have you, ranking #1 like in no time because he's like, everybody else sucks. You're just like the worst of the worst. In terms of searchability, he's like, I love how your site looks. And that's what he said. He goes, the amount of content on here, he goes, he just like couldn't believe how bad, which I thought I was doing pretty good. But again, I don't know how to do that. It's not my job. And I need to realize that at this point and be like, okay, now what do I have to do is prioritize the importance of how we spend our money. So if we're going to spend our money on building bigger bandwidth, we don't just say, hey, we have $15,000, like do whatever you want with it. Like we're still going to be extremely precise because I don't want to spend a bunch of money on advertising. Like you hear anywhere from 10 to 15% of your annual budget should be advertising. The least money you can for the most ROI. That's my thing. I don't know why do you have to spend 10%? If it's 5, cool, do that. If I made $1 million, I do not want to spend $100,000 on advertising. That's ridiculous to me, but maybe that works for some people. So that being said, we're now at 5 doctors. And in my job, which I still remember to this day, we're pretty good friends. Sloan's really good friends with the people that own Moe's Barbecue here in town. And Kevin, the husband of her friend Charlene, one day I can't remember where we were, and he's like, how much do you work on your business instead of in it? And I was like, at the time, I was like, yeah, I work on it. And if I'm being honest with myself, not enough, right? Like that's what he was talking about is what we're facing down the barrel now is like, I have to realize like I have to give myself time to step back. That doesn't mean I like take a bunch of time off, but I have to create space. So the tough thing for me, and Sloan knows this, like I don't see patients on Wednesdays, but it doesn't mean I have more time to do stuff. Like I'm with the kids in the morning and then we have like doctor's meeting and then it's 2:30. Like it's not a ton of time, especially if I want to go for a run or something. Okay, now it's 4. Like, and yeah, you can work at night and I get all that. But I still wear a lot of hats in here. Like I think of myself as like the creative director, the clinical director, and then I do a lot of the back end business stuff. And that stuff's gonna have to get offloaded.
You wear 1,000 hats.
Well, but the thing is we're finding out with the website, maybe I don't wear them as well as I think I do. So that's my job for 2023 into 2024 is figuring out, okay, where am I working on the business that I'm not the guy that should be doing that? And how could we, if, this guy that we're working with out of California on the website is correct, he's like, you should see massive conversion off Google. Because here's the crazy thing. And if you build your websites or do anything, he went back 3 years on Google and it was just a flat line. And he goes, you said you got people off Google? I go, yeah. He goes, you have one blip for a month and it showed 16 conversions. He goes, I don't know where you ever got anybody. I go, people are putting it down. And he goes,
We got that one blip.
He was just baffled. He goes, your website should be just getting like pummeled based on what you guys have. So let's say that works and it's like 40 new patients a month. Like, cool. What else can we do? Right? Or how can we make stuff better? Maybe I don't run that race. Like in terms of putting it on, I hire somebody to put that race on for me. Right? I think it's pretty easy, to be honest with you. It's time. It's not hard to do. It's time. But then these little things of like, what could I offload? What can I offload? And then I hone in on what I'm really good at, which I think I'm decent at running a business. And I say decent. If we are another 10 years down the road, maybe it's not me running this place like that. I think there's something to be said for inner office workings versus building a business are two different things. Like an office manager versus like a CEO is very different. So that's kind of where I see the practice going. And then we both probably have personal things, which that's not what this podcast is about necessarily. But the practice, I think, is going to continue to grow. And we've even thought about second locations. But if I'm being honest, I'm putting that on the boilerplate because there's too much potential that's not being capitalized here. So we need to get everybody just filled to the gills in terms of doctors, booming, and then also see what the lay of the land is by that time, which I'm guessing is going to be a year out from now. And there's a lot of, the other thing is, which I've talked about on previous videos, where we're at geographically is, I would say, just now about ready to jump. It was supposed to jump like 5 years ago, but stuff slowed down in terms of urban sprawl into what's called Chelsea right over here. And now it is starting to just like pretty fast. 400 homes across the street, 400 homes behind our neighborhood, 7 new restaurants coming in right across the street from us, like massive trail systems being built around. Like it's starting to be like, and in another 5 years, we're going to be in a prime location, which also helps by default. And now, like this long-term investment of cheaper rent up front, still cheaper rent now, it's going to be cheap comparatively if we do play our cards right or own real estate is the goal within the next 5 years. Like we will be set up for a win, and it was not a win in the first 5 years. And if you've heard anybody in the business game, marketing game, anything that's worth their shit, it's play the long game, not the short game. And I think that's what we've done fairly well. Even though I'm going to be honest, that wasn't on purpose. I knew some of it was. I knew this location was an on-purpose long-term play. Like I told her that from the get-go. Like it's not great. It's going to be a little work getting people out there. People will still to this day say it's hard to get out here. I get it. But like that was a conscious decision. It was not like, oh, we have to go out here because it's cheap. We took out $100,000 loan. We could have went anywhere and stomached it. It was the smartest choice, in my opinion. Haley had a question here. Let's see. Do you worry with wearing so many hats? Some of the hats. Yeah, it's just what. Sorry, I didn't see your question, but yeah, I answered that. And that's I think I'd have to test it too, because we have hired people to try to offload some of those hats, and they're not as good. And maybe that was a poor person. I also have a very strong like conviction or vision about what I want done, and in particular, like creatively, with the practice. So that's something that like I might not let go of forever, even if I was like I kind of run the practice and see patients. I might be like creative input, even if we had like a marketing director, an office manager. I'd be like, I want input on this all the time, so I'd withhold some of those. Um, yeah,
It's really hard to give up those roles when you know that you can do them and do them well.
And cheaper.
And when you've been burned in the past by people trying to do them for you.
Yeah.
But with that question, it kind of makes me think, can you think of or identify something over the last 10 years that we have given up to another person or role, entity, whatever, and it's been successful?
Like how much of it we done? Well, like the things that I always think of that people talk about is like bookkeeping.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be honest with you. Like I have another friend that's Cairo. Like we both still keep our books, even though we have accountants. That's on purpose too. I'm not giving that up because that's how I keep a pulse on the practice. And it literally takes me, less than an hour. It takes my friend more time. I don't know why. Maybe he has way more shells to look at. It takes me an hour a month. And if I didn't do that, I think I'd get lost. And pretty soon it's like I could have somebody running a bookkeeper, an accountant. I don't realize what's going on. The bookkeeper would obviously keep me updated. That's something I'm not going to let go of. Now, 20 years down the road, maybe. But at that time, you're much bigger and it becomes much more complex. And at that point, that's where a bookkeeper becomes more like a CFO of like overlooking maybe real estate, multiple entities, like cash flow. We're not quite there. I'm trying to think of stuff that we have given up.
This is little, but cleaning.
Oh yeah.
I mean, little, but for
that
a
was
long time we were cleaning our own office and
yeah, sounds funny. And people are like, oh really? Yeah. I mean, 150, 180 bucks
that
every 2 weeks. We didn't want to do that early. And then we're like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, God, I wish it came every week, but I'm not going to pay her either.
We tried to find a laundry service and that was unsuccessful.
Yeah, was terrible.
We washed and dried and folded so many towels for so long.
We did laundry service for a while. It was just you had to pick it up and it was expensive. Didn't work. Other stuff, like a lot of when we say outsource, it's more task based. So like when we talked about it all the time, like if I had an editor, right, for all these videos and stuff, like that would massively offload me. Those people are extremely expensive. And to be honest with you, I don't think we do quite enough in that realm to warrant that person yet, which is a hard thing for me.
And it hurts so bad to pay such high money.
And it's not.
And it's not great.
And we run it, to be honest, for the past month with our gym, we had an outside source pay for somebody to do our social media. It was terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Go look at some of the posts on our Farmhouse Fitness page. It's terrible. And that's somebody that's being paid to do that. What was the problem? We had to check all the copy because they don't know how to write at a technical level. It doesn't take
work away from you.
And then the things that they should be good at, design and all that, they weren't. Get rid of them. That was literally, I was like, stop. Put that money elsewhere. And can I do it? Yeah, I think I can do it pretty good. Can I do it as good as somebody does it professionally? Well, not that professional, but at a higher level, no. So it's just what you're ready for. But we have office staff too. So it's not like we are ever lone soldiers doing billing. Like we never did any of that stuff. And that's where a lot of people are saying offload. We started in a different manner on purpose, right? We didn't want to do that stuff for a lot of reasons. Perception of what in my opinion, a professional medical office looks like. Somebody that had done billing for 6 years before they came here to work. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like I can't answer. In my opinion, I don't think it's a good move, and I'm going to be very transparent. I don't think it's a good move to run your office on your own, doing the virtual assistant thing and then answering messages. I get that you can do online booking and all that stuff very cheap and easy. If we open a satellite, we might do that, but guess what? We still have a phone that rings to a person. If you're going to open a professional medical office, realize that like I get it's 2023, it's a little bit, or 2024, it's a little bit different. People are still indoctrinated to want to talk to a person about things before they book an appointment or money, whatever it is. And there's also an experience that I want when people walk into an office, right? How they're greeted. It's actually a person. It's not just an iPad. Again, I've toyed around with opening a remote office with all digital, virtual, like no, face-to-face, but you still have this central hub that like there's still a contact point. I would never do it just by itself.
Well, I think one of the biggest home runs we've ever hit was Bridget.
Oh yeah, we got super lucky.
Unbelievably. Unreal lucky. She was one of the first people I met when I moved to Birmingham, and she's still with us, and she's family. She bought in early to our practice, and I don't know, I consider it her practice too.
But something we were talking about literally at dinner last night is, there's a local high school athletic trainer that's not a fan of ours, and not a fan of
Putting it lightly.
We've never met this person. Has a chip on her shoulder. It sounds like in general, I don't know what it is, but you're not going to please everybody. Not everybody's going to like you. I wish they did, because it's literally the high school right down the road. We see a ton of people out of there. I don't know what the deal is, but some of the bigger challenges that I've had to face is my whole model of practice had to change from day one, because I thought I was going to be high school sidelines, football, doing all this stuff. No, I'm not saying it's an impossibility in Alabama. It is really tough for a chiropractor to do that. I mean, you can't be sideline care, right? The High School Coach Association determined that one. Can't treat concussions, primary symptoms. That's what I kind of did a bunch of specialty work in. So all these things I thought I was going to do, again, I had to pivot and evolve, which is maybe that's the theme of this thing, is like, as we went through practice, we pivoted and evolved, try stuff, right? Gymnast Fix, podcasts, hiring different people. You try all these things and not getting too hung up on any one failure. I mean, we've lost a bunch of money doing stuff. And if I'm being honest, I'm not making near as much money in the practice I want to. And I think we have the opportunity to absolutely just springboard this in the next year for sure. And year and a half, I think it's just going to be a massive upswell. We'll see if that happens, but we have a lot of pieces. I mean, we're not going to have another kid. If she gets back in the office more, that helps immensely, because if I'm being honest, Sloan's just kind of personality within the office helps a lot from that patient experience vibe. It also helps with revenue, because she's seeing more people. As we get more new patients, that helps everybody else. As we get Seth and Alex more involved in the community, they create their own niches, just like Daniel has. So then that builds individuality within the practice. You kind of stir that all up into a pot and you let it kind of simmer for 6 to 8 months. I think that's where you're like, man, this thing is getting big. What I have to watch is don't take the heat off that thing. So don't take the top off the pot and try to start expanding immediately or doing crazy different stuff. Because maybe you have a massive cash inflow, or, I don't have to see any patients because we're making so much money. No. That's probably my biggest takeaway from looking at Instagram, strolling down memory lane, was man, we always stuck to our guns. And maybe sometimes when we got away from that small mom and pop or Beau and Sloan feel is when stuff went sideways. And I mean, I still remember this day when we did a survey, which I think it only went to 2,000 people because it was year 2 in practice. The number one complaint was the music. Well, not number one, it was 5 people because it was most consistent and they didn't like the country music. I was like, screw you. But the one,
such a amazing problem to have. That's one of the top problems.
Yeah. But the one thing that we heard in that survey a few times, which is crazy for year 2, is that we were becoming more focused on money and less on the patient. And we both looked at each other and we were like, we haven't changed anything, which I think we just became more streamlined in our a business. It wasn't just hey, come in, we'll figure it out, because we didn't know what the hell we were doing. When you come in and they're like, hey, you have to pay your cope, we just knew what we were doing. And it was just a weird one to me, but I'm aware of that all the time. And I would never want people to feel like cogs in a wheel, or just you're going through the system. Because there are those clinics all over the place, and that's who I want to absolutely just destroy. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe via YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. If you like the message, please share it. We appreciate it. Thank you.